So the first step to drawing any portrait is that we want to draw a circle. Now it's important to note here that your circle does not have to be perfect so long as its height is relative to its width. If you want, you can use a compass tool to get your circle closer to perfect, if you will. And then we're going to punch in our side oval. Now I want you to keep in the back of your mind when you're placing your side oval that the top of the oval needs to align roughly with where you're going to place the hair, and the bottom of that oval needs to align roughly where you're going to be placing the subject's nose. Okay. Now here, we're going to place our vertical and our horizontal axis, and then here I'm going to put a temple plane. Why not? That is meant to elongate the face. We're going to extend our hairline over. We're going to extend our horizontal axis over for the brow line, and then we're going to extend the bottom of our nose line over. We're going to place the center line of the face, and then I'm going to extend the vertical axis down and then connect that. And then I'm going to place the cheek plane as well. We're then going to want to go in with our eraser and erase this part of the initial circle. And then, why not? We're going to punch in our neck. And then right here, this is where you want to place the anchor point. There's 2 anchor points in the third section of the face, according to the Loomis Method. So the top anchor point here is for the top of the upper lip. And then there's the second anchor point, which is to showcase the bottom of the lower lip. If you want to, refer to the second reference on the bottom there, and you can see precisely why we're drawing the Loomis head the way that we are. Okay, and then you can take your kneaded eraser and you can just go ahead and hit your Loomis head so that it's more or less transparent, right? And we're going to draw on the top of it, but we're using the Loomis head as a framework for the rest of the drawing here, right? So, as with others, first step is that we want to punch in the subject's ear. Now, if you abide by this approach, then that means that the ear goes first. The ear always fits nicely into the bottom rear quadrant of the side oval. And of course, when I say rear, that is relative to the front of the face, right? So it's rear to the front of the face. Just like this, we're just sketching a basic 2-dimensional shape. At this point in the drawing process, we are not worried about details, we are worried about proportion. So that is why the Loomis head acts as our mannequin for placing these facial features for our reference photo. This allows us to draw as accurate of a sketch as possible. And now, I'm not saying that you can't freehand this stuff. There are artists that are able to do that, but that's not us, right? We need this structure. It's meant to help us. So now once we have that ear placed, we can then use that as a basis, proportionally speaking, for exactly where the reference's hair sits. Okay, so we're using the ear to help us place the hair. And then once the hair is all drawn in, we'll use that to help us place other features, right? A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. I've mentioned this in other tutorials, but it is very much a process. It is logistical. It is a flow. Step 1, step 2, right? So just like this, I've extended up on the back end, but then what I'm going to do, and what I like to do, is I run the hairline for the side of the head up to the hairline of the underlying Loomis head. And then from there, I like to solidify that, okay? Because that's placed there for a reason. That hairline from the Loomis head is meant to be the guide for this placement right here, okay? So when it comes to hair, the way I like to do it is I like to identify the basic outer shape of the hair. Once I have the 2-dimensional outer shape of the hair drawn in, then I will go in and I will start to sketch in segments of hair, which help me to identify the flow when it comes time to sketching and blending and bringing out gradation and values and all of that stuff. But we're not there yet, right? If you can't do this, none of that's going to matter anyway, because your proportions will be off. So just like this right here. We're thinking about the outer shape of that hair. We're thinking about how that hair sits on the skull, on the Loomis head in this case, right? Because this is the method that we're abiding by. And so just like this, we're going to sketch this in. Yeah, something more or less like that. Now, the way that I want you to think about this is these lines that I'm sketching in, these are the segments. This is the direction that hair is flowing, right? So in this case, obviously he's got a comb over. So he's got the part, the comb over, and then the hair on this side of the head is obviously very short, okay? But you can just sketch in some general lines just like this. It doesn't have to be anything too fancy considering how short the hair actually is. And then when it comes to the far side of the face, this is where, 3/4 turn, profile angles. I mean, this is a 3/4, but it's a little bit more like a profile angle with the way he's looking. And so what we want to do is we want to carve out that outer shape of the subject's face first, and then that will help us to place the nose, the mouth, and the eyes. Something just like this. You can see how I'm really starting to thicken up the line quality on this one. I'm lowering that line weight, right? I'm making that line weight more saturated. I'm making it heavier by definition. And now what we're going to do is we're going to switch from the Loomis method to the Asaro method. Of course, the Asaro method identifies the basic planes of the face, and so we're going to use this. So the nose bridge is the first plane, so that's a horizontal line, and then we're going to draw vertical lines at a slight angle up, and those vertical lines, the top of those things, plug in to the basic two-dimensional shape of the subject's eyebrows, right? Just like this. Again, no details here, just shape. And you can see how the nose bridge plane on this specific subject is a lot smaller. It's almost squished, if you will, compared to other references that we've drawn. Now, what I like to do for these types of angles is I'm going to extend my line down, which essentially is the far side of the nose ridge plane, and then I like to pull this line down and over, and that just kind of gives me a basis so that I can start to draw out that far eye. And we're going to use the frame lines here. So frame line 1, frame line 2, and you can barely see the third one given the nature of the angle. We're going to connect those frame lines for the top of the eye. This specific subject has eyelids, but the way his face is formed is you don't really see them. So it's more or less something like this. And then of course we have frame line 1, 2, and 3. And then once those are placed, we want to connect them, just like this, see? Connect 1 to 2. Just like that. And then of course, 2 to 3. And then we want to connect the bottom of that roughly, and that will give us the basic shape of our subject's eye. Yeah, something just like that. And while we're here, let's go ahead and punch in the iris and the pupil. Why not? I don't think I'm going to worry about that far eye. You can't even really see it in the reference photo anyway, so. Well, that looks pretty good. Happy with that. Okay, so now, after we've built out the eyes, then we want to build out the nose. And so notice what we're doing here is we are starting from the bottom, and then we are extending up. And we're using that underlying Loomis nose line as the foundation for where the nose begins, and we're building the nose from bottom up. We have that bottom plane. When it comes to this step, if you have questions, refer to the Asaro head reference that I've provided for you. And that will give you a really, really good idea of what it is that we are trying to accomplish here in this step of the drawing process. And then of course this plane here, we're going to pull this up, And this is the nose ridge plane. Remember, the nose ridge plane is the top of the nose, and that plugs into the nose bridge plane. The ridge and the bridge. And then right here, this is the slope plane. Kind of like a mountain top, right? You think of a mountain. You have the ridge of the mountain, which is the top. And then that mountain slopes all the way down to the valleys, right? It's the exact same principle here, only it's, for the nose of our subject. And then once we have the nose built out, and that looks pretty good, what we want to do is we want to pull these lines down right here. And what these are is these bring out the philtrum, right? The philtrum extends down from the bottom of the nose and plugs into the upper lip. And then right here, we're just going to identify the corners of the mouth. And then we're going to just extend this line up roughly to where those philtrum lines are. And then that more or less gives us a really nice structure for that upper lip of the subject. And then where those two lips meet, we just kind of want to sketch this line in. These lips here are closed, so it's fairly simple. Yeah, we'll just pull this line kind of like that. And then we want to build out that bottom lip. And it's at kind of a slight angle. A good best practice for this right here is when you pull this line, you don't actually want to connect it to the corner of the mouth. You just kind of want to pull it up and let it fade off into nothing. Lift as you conclude your line, right? Yeah, just pull up and connect that. And now that we have the basic outer shape of the lips drawn in, then what you want to do is you want to place your Loomis planes. So 2 planes for the top lip, so you split that one in half, and then the bottom planes, you basically follow your philtrum lines for where those plane lines fall. And that splits that bottom lip into 3 planes. You can't really see the third plane on the bottom lip in this angle, but it's there. And then I'm just going to kind of more or less sketch in where these, shapes are there. Kind of like the way that looks. That's coming along pretty good. I actually like that. Very nice. Okay. So now that we have that drawn in, what we want to do is we're going to refer to the Asaro head model, and we're going to start sketching in these Asaro planes, right? So we're extending from the corner of the mouth and then up to the corner of the nose. We're going to bring this line down right here from the top of the slope plane, and then that, of course, plugs into the rest of the Asaro plane. So this one extends vertical, just like this. Vertical, and then we're going to refer to the model there. Yeah, something like that. And then it kind of comes up like this. Now, you don't have to punch in these Asaro plane lines if you don't want to. I'm using a very, very light pressure control here, but I think that it's a good best practice for you, especially if you're trying to build your knowledge on how you can approach portraits using the Loomis and the Asaro method in this way. It's only going to help you, so you might as well. But yes, just like this, because essentially what I'm doing here is I am sketching in these planes for my drawing so that when the time comes for me to start hatching and cross-hatching, blending, whether I'm using graphite or charcoal, even if you're painting, right? Like maybe you're doing a wet-on-wet technique or something like that, like you can use this exact same sketching approach for the foundational drawing that you have. And then of course you can just paint over the top of it using the sketch as a guide. Lots of artists do that. It's really up to you as far as how much structure you think you need or know that you don't need, right? Everyone's at a different level. You should never compare where you're at with someone else, especially if you're a novice, because of the fact that there are people that are just a lot more advanced in the sense of what they know and how they approach different things. But what we're doing here, it's kind of hard to see because I have the Loomis head underneath, and I probably could have erased it a lot more, but we're punching in these Asaro planes, which give the sketch a lot more form. Essentially, we're framing the 3-dimensional form within the 2-dimensional drawing. And if you've been struggling with just the Loomis method, don't you stress. Not at all. Don't do that. I have drawn literally thousands of portraits in my time. So for me, when I sketch something out like this, it looks like, you might find yourself falling behind, but that's only because I failed a lot more than you. That's all it is. We build on failure, right? I believe it was Johnny Cash that said that. We build on failure. We don't use it as an excuse to quit. We use it as fuel to strive ever higher, right? The top of the mountain is merely the bottom of the next. So that's all it is. Have fun. Don't stress. I've mentioned that in other tutorials too. It's not about stressing, it's about having fun and making something that you're proud of. And that is what art truly is at the end of the day. But these Asaro planes will help frame the subject. And then this one's more or less he's kind of a floating head, I guess, right? So what we could do is we could go in here and we could actually give him a collar and some shoulders, which would definitely make the drawing look a lot more dynamic. We have some shadows here that are cast, but I'm just going to kind of pull these lines down real quick and kind of build this out. I mean, we only have about another minute, but yeah, I'm just going to pull these down. Something like that. But the biggest thing when you're going through your drawing is just make sure that you use a very nice light pressure control. And that way, if you need to go back and you need to make adjustments, right? Like if you need to erase a piece of the drawing, go back over it, redraw a line so that you're a little bit happier with your proportions. By all means, definitely do that. There's a reason why I call them adjustments, is because in drawing, there's no such thing as a mistake. Most people don't ever even try and even make the mistake in the first place. And here you are getting it and getting after it and learning and progressing, which is good. So that's pretty much it for this one. Stay happy, stay healthy, and remember, never stop drawing.